I don't know how much I've got in me to actually make a full video on this, or whether it's just going to be like a short, or I'm going to actually upload it at all. But let's just have a go, because I want to talk more. Like, it's going to be a girl talk, I feel like. Well, actually, it can be a boy talk as well. Let's just change the things on here. I've been very interested, I'm always interested in like psychology and sociology and stuff, and it's interesting to know from a relationship standpoint that females find one chemical, I think it's oxytocin, that makes them fall in love, okay, and males actually have a stress hormone which makes them fall in love. So this is why when a woman is showing a lot of affection to a man, it doesn't, like, the oxytocin that he might get is not what will make him fall in love, but the correct amount of stress is what makes him fall in love. I can't remember what it's actually called, but it's actually a stress hormone. Because I guess men are like, they work on like obviously a motivation level rather than a kind of, you know, nurturing perspective. So that would be why, because if they're like obviously if they're like receiving the right amount of stress, it would mean they're motivated properly, and therefore it's like a sustainable relationship for them, which is fair enough. Another thing I found interesting is stereotypically, but also biologically, it's not to say that sometimes you don't get masculine women and feminine men. You'd call this like a pretty boy, if you want to put this in a thing, and also women, I feel like, just come in all shapes and sizes. But from a masculine attributes, they are more like a provider, like a like I saw this on a piece of thing that I saw. So men are like, masculine traits are more like a provider and a let's just use the word, and supposed to be like confident. Let's just like use that. I don't know if confidence was on there, but let's just stay with provider. And then the females, it was more about nurturance, and it wasn't even nurturance, it was admiration, was something that I wanted to talk about. Because I think an issue, and I think it is about differences in the ways that we communicate and the ways we are as people. Because I've definitely seen, I feel like there's this thing with some men, right? And I think we all like look for different standards in relationships, and I think one person's standard is not the same as another person's standard. And honestly, I think it can be very attractive when a man knows, okay, I'm not saying that this man may not be narcissistic, but I feel like the attractiveness about it is when a man knows the admiration that he requires from a woman, okay? Hear me out. You might be like, yeah, dickhead. Yeah, I literally would like agree. I wouldn't go for this type of man because I'm not prepared to give that amount of admiration. However, I feel like if a man knows the amount of admiration that he desires in a relationship, he will. It can be difficult, because I feel like I saw a man, and to be fair, I don't trust this man because I've heard him say something pretty wrong and confusing that was narcissistic, but he made an interesting point which I will just unpack a little bit. He said if they're like, he was talking about how a man should feel appreciated if he's doing all this stuff for someone. Like, he was saying, like, a man will like can run for a brick wall for a woman if he feels that her nurturance and her like admiration is something that he wants to, you know, have in his life. Whether that's like a narcissistic, like, future faking situation, quite possibly. Is he like a competitive narcissist trying to kind of like stir up something within women? You know, I know that a lot of narcissists, hence they have no kind of happy set point goal that a woman can actually achieve. This would make a lot of sense to me, but the point he puts across is interesting, because I feel like, going back to the point that I said, that it can be attractive if a man knows what he wants, even if he is a narcissist and his standards are somewhere in the fairies, which doesn't exist. Not to say that he can't find satisfaction from the right person, but obviously I don't think like marriage and stuff is about satisfaction as much as other stuff, which I'm yet to find out because I'm not married, but you know, just contentment and various other things, God and blah blah blah. But anyway, But it's still an interesting point because of that fact that I don't think some women, for various reasons, biology, the way that you act, I definitely think we all act in very, very different ways because of our makeup and because of our being and who we are as people. How our love languages even, one person that has a certain love language will not provide that other love language that someone else might want. If someone is talking about getting admiration, if their love language is words of affirmation and someone else doesn't do that and they're showing admiration in other ways, for example, time spent, okay, you know, and then that love language would not be being received, which is why love languages are important in the right relationship. You know, you don't want to be worrying about love languages in the wrong relationship where, you know, there's things like lust and, you know, narcissistic abuse involved. But I feel like it is an interesting thing because I do think languages are relevant, and it's not like I've had the perfect relationships in my life. I have had some relationships, but it's something and I don't think it's really something to think out, to sort out in a relationship. But I also think it's interesting to know from a distance, I feel like, just from an observational perspective, if nothing else, because I'm not going to sit there and be like, I mean, I kind of can, but I also think it helps you, I don't know, because the fact is, often maturity comes into relationships, and not having the maturity to understand other people in the way that you might in years to come, but also, like, you don't know what you don't know, do you know what I mean? So it's not like to say, oh, you know, the amount of admiration I'm willing to give is this amount, and therefore my man must be such. You know what I mean? Not that I'm like that, quite happy being single. At the same time, not looking that way, am I? But no, it's and vice versa, you know. But yeah, I feel like you only know what you know, and it's not worth like overanalyzing to that level. But it is interesting to know that women like the amount of oxytocin that's released, because I always find it quite interesting to see how, like, some parts of a man can be extremely attractive to, like, a lot of women. For example, if they're like, this could be like put in many ways. Say if someone's like super tall, well built, stocky, not stocky, but like broadly built, should I say, you know, relatively attractive face, you know, most women would find that attractive. However, you get another man that may be a lot shorter and possibly, I don't know, not built in a broad sense, that may be equally attractive, but also maybe not be as equally attractive, because a woman may not have the amount of oxytocin released from a physical level because of the primal instinct that they may be attacked and not protected as well. Not to say that men that are physically able to attack will protect, because it's actually a fact that men that you expect to protect you may actually attack you, and that is the psychology behind having very violent and aggressive men as partners, just FYI. But it's interesting to me how that all works, and it's probably because the woman's getting an excess of oxytocin, a lot of oxytocin, and women are getting a lot of oxytocin, which makes them, you say, fall in love, find attractive, whatever, but the man is not being very stressed because the woman doesn't press his buttons in a way. When I say press his buttons, by that I mean make him work. Okay, again, I'm talking about worldly relationships here. I'm probably not touching on the whole marriage situation, but even to kind of move that into a long-term relationship situation, I mean, they're not conversing in a healthy, balanced enough way to make it a maintainable relationship, and therefore the man's stress hormones are all over the place. And I just want to bring cheating into this, because I'm not saying that cheating is ever okay, or that it's okay narcissistic relationships or non-narcissistic relationships, but apparently cheaters, they go for, it's a fact that was documented that the 10% missing in a current relationship that they have will cause them to cheat with someone that has that extra 10%. Okay, even if 90% of them is nothing like what they want, but 10% that is missing in a certain relationship causes them to move outside the relationship to find that 10%. But then they realise that they were probably better off with the original partner, who might have 50% of what they're actually wanting and desiring in a partner. So I found that also interesting, because I think it can come down to, if I want to look at it scientifically and logically, even though, it looks like I'm validating cheating, I'm not, but I do think men, from the science, work on a motivational level, on a biological sense, and that is why they're like, within themselves, they want to achieve and to be motivated, so they are motivated to get that extra 10% that is missing. So yeah, I also find this very interesting. And it's like, and then it's like, do women get bored and then potentially, and is this why relationships end? Because a woman is getting so much oxytocin that they feel overly, because I think women, even, you don't want too much oxytocin either, because you still want to be motivated for life yourself, because we all have masculine attributes within ourselves, and you don't want to be overpowered, not only overpowered but overprotected. I feel like to be protected is to be protected in a healthy way and just, an adequate way. I feel like, not to say like a man's gonna like to protect you from everyone and everything, we are all, but from a primal instinct to feel somewhat protected adequately by a male counterpart as a female, and vice versa. As I said, sometimes the female attains more masculine traits than the male, and that is just the honest truth. That is the way it works in nature, right? Female tarantulas eat the male tarantula after they reproduce, so women are often more scary in certain species in the wild, and also sometimes in the world, women can attain more masculine features than males in other ways, and vice versa. So, but then is it like, do you have to account for the fact that certain feminine men, okay, have to have oxytocin released in a relationship to feel comfortable? I do think, like, I don't want to talk about gender fluidity here, because it's not really something I'm talking about, because gender is gender, and it's like, love is love and all that stuff. But I also feel like, if you get a masculine female, is she going to want to have more motivation and drive? And a feminine male, is he going to want to have more oxytocin than a more masculine male to feel secure in a relationship? And that's just an interesting point to contemplate as well, because I definitely think that can be a factor. And as I said, love is love, and it's it's so like whatever, because it's something that crosses my mind, because it's not for me to be overly interested in other people's relationships. But I feel like, from my standpoint, I would consider myself having masculine traits in some level, and I think we are all built in different ways. I think it's interesting to contemplate from an observer's perspective, but it's like, sometimes, because again, it's not for me to kind of look at other people's relationships, but I think for even myself, I think there is a sense of, I did a video recently, whether I posted it or not, I can't remember, but I mentioned how I was like an alpha female, and sometimes alpha females attract toxic males, and it's important to, and for me it was important to recognise if men were toxic, and I don't think that's happened very often, to be honest, if at all. Maybe a little bit toxicity may have come from the fact from certain power struggles, but and I think power struggles I'm also just going to talk about quickly, because this is just like something that I'm like moving through in my relationship journey. Power struggles are important to consider, because I feel like through the whole, I think it takes like 6 months or something for the honeymoon phase to end, and then you go into the power struggle phase, and And I think, like, from an attraction level, there's a lot to be said with things like pheromones and like physical attraction to create a place of you know, level power dynamics in a healthy relationship, you know. And potentially it's important to recognize that sometimes maybe the power dynamic, I think you do want it to be right, because, but also, like, obviously you get different attributes that might create this in different ways, because I feel like sometimes you don't want too little power in each side, because it can then be boring, and you may find that, you know, no one holds the power, therefore there is no one to desire to hold the power, you know, or one person holds too much of the power and the other one feels, you know, belittled, or, you know, one person feels unwanted and the other one feels, you know, like they have to do everything on their own. And, you know, and then you don't want to have too much power on either side, because there can then be, I think, fights, and there can be misuse of power, and kind of one person not feeling heard and another person, you know, taking too much on the chin, and then, you know, there might be deception or kind of covert kind of difficulty in communication, and things missed, or, you know, sinful behaviour like lust, if there is a you know, for compensation even, to kind of for functioning of a relationship. And yeah, so I think that's also important to consider. But yeah, I don't want to like chat on too much. I feel like this video probably has been long enough to create a video from, so thanks for listening, and I like talking about this kind of stuff, so bye.